and I lead a team focused on use and innovation at the Celo Foundation. And I'm really excited to be with you today. So, as Angelo hinted, the mission of the Celo community is to create conditions of prosperity for all. So I'm very excited to be on this panel with three amazing organizations that are working to achieve that goal. And so without further ado, I'm turning it over to Christine Violago from the Grameen Foundation to talk about how she and the Grameen Foundation are using Celo to drive impact around the world.
Thank you, Will, and good day, everyone. My name is Christine Violago. I'm the country manager of Grameen Foundation here in the Philippines. So I'm coming all over from Manila. And thank you to Celo for inviting me to share about our work in this Kuneco Community Conference. Next slide, please. So allow me to begin by presenting a brief of our organization. So Grameen is a global nonprofit whose mission is to enable the poor, especially women, to create a world without poverty and hunger. And we leverage on the use of technology to implement programs in the areas of financial services, innovations for agriculture, with a focus on community agents and women's economic empowerment. We are present in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and we've been in the Philippines since 2010. So Grameen also responded to the crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic through the unconditional cash transfers to low-income women and the COVID-19 relief program supported by JP Morgan. Next slide, please. So today, I will be focusing on our COVID-19 relief that also features our partnership with Celo. Relief stands for Response to Enhance Livelihood of Individual Entrepreneurs and Families, and its goal was to provide immediate aid assistance and long-term recovery support to female micro-entrepreneurs in two locations, which was number one, Metro Manila and Cebu City. When the project began last year, there were over about 37,000 COVID-19 positive cases across the country, and with community quarantines being posed both at the national and local levels. These quarantines, while essential for curbing the spread of the virus, also pose severe effects on the livelihoods of a lot of Filipinos. Women who were more likely the primary caregivers of their homes and managers of their business were impacted heavily. So some of them lost their household income or experienced closure of their stores. So to support the recovery effort, we sought the partnership with two microfinance institutions or MFIs and partnerships with two fintech partners, Celo and Go, to provide access to essential information and immediate relief support. So next slide, please. So at the beginning, Grameen did the pre-selection process and gathered data on our would-be beneficiaries with the help of our microfinance institution partners. Here you can see that more than half of all our beneficiaries are middle-aged or between the ages of 35 to 54 years old. Majority of them belong to households with about 5 to 7 members, and their businesses range from running small neighborhood shops, selling ready-to-wear clothing, pieces of items, food vending, and more. Next slide. So Grameen responded to the most pressing needs of 3,500 micro-entrepreneurs by delivering non-cash assistance from June to October of 2020. And there were two types of digital journeys that were tested in this program. The first was through an SMS. So Grameen reached 2,767 beneficiaries who owned the feature phone. Each one received serial codes with about $5,000 or $101 via SMS. The micro-entrepreneur or the beneficiary presented the code to the designated grocery stores or partner merchants along with their microfinance IDs in exchange for vouchers. So upon the receipt of the vouchers, women were empowered to make that choice by showing that vouchers to the store and purchase the items they wish. The other method was through the use of a smartphone. Grameen was able to reach 733 women entrepreneurs. And the experience of this started by downloading the Valora application developed by Celo. And also they were introduced to the Go microsite. This was an e-commerce platform that offered grocery store items, store vouchers, mobile load credits, and other household packages which was readily available for, or at that time, a basic necessity needed by the household. Upon confirmation of the Valora account, Grameen sent a value of about 5,000 pesos or $101 to the e-wallet in Valora. This allowed them to purchase their preferred items, medical vouchers, grocery items, and household items that can be delivered straight to their address at home. So this also decreased the risk of having them exposed to the COVID-19 virus. So both methods tested the delivery of immediate support successfully in a safe and secure manner. Next slide, please. So we wanted to take a look also of the purchasing behavior of the beneficiaries after they received the vouchers or the value that they got in the Valora app. Most items, or most of them, used the codes and the vouchers and the money to buy their basic necessities. And this include some of the inventories that they needed for their business or to support their livelihood. So majority bought items intended for resale, and some are raw materials for inputs to their services or business. And the products purchased, as you can see in the screen, they range from canned goods to milk and other food items, and some of them had also shared it to their neighbors and to their other family members. Next slide, please. Part of our goal was to also provide quick and actionable advice to the women. So while we wanted to also introduce a new technology, it's also important to provide some light touch assistance or advice to them. We developed an SMS architecture that focused on providing financial health and advice in time of a crisis. Grameen sent a total of 24,488 personalized messages to beneficiaries and MFI staff members. So by the end of October, we started to begin the phase 2 of our project, which involved education to women on how to properly sustain their business in times of a crisis. So either through the use of technology and, of course, introducing a new curriculum, which is the Resilient Life, Resilient Business curriculum. Next slide, please. So for this year, Grameen is continuing our partnership with Celo for our social dividend campaign. And our target is to create a Celo dollar ecosystem where our beneficiaries and merchants can take part in transactions using the Celo US dollar or Celo dollar. We live in a very interesting times, and I think we all continue to face unique barriers and challenges. But by working together and recognizing our strengths as organizations, I think we will slowly overcome these different challenges and different crises. So we look forward to exploring partnerships as we work towards economic women empowerment and financial resilience, leveraging on the transformational use of technology. So thank you, everyone. And now I return the floor back to Will.
Thank you so much, Christine. And thank you for your continued partnership with the Celo community. And so now I'm happy to introduce Robbie Greenfield from Emerging Impact, who will talk about some of the great things he and his team are working on. Robbie?
There we go. Hey, everyone. Let me quickly share my screen. Let me know. Let's see. Apologies for the technical difficulties trying to. Can everyone see my screen right now? Can everyone see it now?
You're good.
There we go. Apologies, guys. So, hey, my name is Robert Greenfield. I'm CEO of Emerging Impact, where we are looking to provide open banking for emerging markets. And we're very blessed to be working with the Celo Foundation, among others, to help realize this and hopefully continue a lot of the work just shared with Grameen. So, first, who is Emerging Impact? Of course, we don't have As great as impact and champion for change profile as a Grameen Foundation, but we're hoping to follow in their footsteps, and with the help of the Celo Foundation and other partners that we've recently created. So here at Emerging Impact, we focus on a few things: humanitarian aid, specifically digital humanitarian aid, leveraging stablecoins like CUSD. We were, very proud to help start, this trend in crypto-backed humanitarian aid, but also helping develop the methodology over the course of, many different pilots and many to come as to how can you leverage cryptocurrency responsibly, and also what are some other on-ramps and off-ramps that you can help create and automate in emerging markets so that you can simplify the process of not only receiving aid, but also accessing different financial services. The second is open banking. And some of you all may have heard this term, open banking, and don't quite understand, what it is. It's not a very descriptive term. Or you just say, well, my bank is already open, so I'm not sure how this changes anything. But open banking is the concept that traditionally, when you have access to a bank, you just have access to an account, right? You can't automatically make transfers from your checkings account to your savings account, or from your checking account to somebody else's, or access, really any financial services without putting in some application. But the idea behind open banking is allowing your bank or any entity that you bank with to extend their infrastructure to allow for social finance applications to be created, and other things that could impact millions of people at a time. And the reason why this is incredibly important is because it extends the accessibility of financial services as a whole. And this is something that we see traditionally, with, OKCoin Exchange or Prime Trust or Silvergate in the West. But you don't see, or Anchorage, for example, which I know is another partner of the Celo Foundation, but you don't quite see this in emerging markets. And in fact, it's a huge barrier toward creating digital financial infrastructure and enabling people to not only receive aid digitally, but also to access other financial services. So this is something that we're working toward, and is the ideal of creating open banking systems in emerging markets. The next is enabling DeMi. So we tried to create a term, we'll see if it sticks, but just like DeFi is decentralized finance, DeMi is decentralized microfinance. And really what that means is that we're not focused on, having access necessarily to Ether or Uni, or other, more so governance tokens, but really access to how can you create a safe, responsible environment for people to take out loans or lend to others using stablecoins like CUSD in an interoperable and globally competitive market. And this doesn't just mean liquidity pools with community members like you or I, who may be a little bit more tech literate, maybe have used MetaMask in the past, but also emerging market institutions, financial institutions, who may want to create their own liquidity pools, but don't necessarily want to commingle that liquidity with some person across the world, right? So this flexibility in lending is incredibly important, and also creating limits, right? Borrowing limits, but also lending limits to keep people safe. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that in any decentralized ecosystem that someone uses, that they aren't harmed by it. So that's another thing, is making sure that things are responsible and safe, and how we can build on pre-existing protocols to do that and enable decentralized microfinance. And of course, last but not least, we can't do any of the former three without partners. Primarily this has been the Celo Foundation, but we also have a couple announcements of some major NGOs that will be deploying some Celo for Good pilots with, all of them based off of digital cash transfer. And hopefully, this continues on to microfinance and many other use cases. So, but before we get into all of that, really proud to announce, over the past few months, we've been trying to, create a paper and capture, okay, what is the methodology of digital cash assistance? How can major NGOs, small NGOs, medium-sized NGOs deploy digital currency or, digital cash to the people who need it most in a way that doesn't require any technical literacy and can meet them, where they need. And so we've created a paper with the Celo Foundation called Future Proof Aid Policy, which goes over not only case studies around digital cash assistance, but understanding certain policies that organizations should have in place to responsibly do so. And this is not meant to be a one size fits all. We want to see organizations take this and extend it to the next level. Make changes based off of community needs and feasibility studies that your organizations do. And this can, be an initial foundation that forever iterates. So, of course, an intro to digital currency for those who aren't, as acquainted. Case studies in terms of what we've done with Oxfam Pacific in the past, and then also a roadmap introducing what we've called a community compliance methodology. So combining those ideas of product design, but also methodology and community, involvement into one single process. And so that leads to another announcement, which, would love to talk about with you all, which is the Celo for Good humanitarian aid programs. So these are digital cash assistance programs across Ecuador, Haiti, and Kenya that we'll be doing over probably the next year. And it's really exciting because each of these programs offer a different facet of what a humanitarian aid program can be. And they also test the flexibility of blockchain technology and emerging tech in emerging markets, which is incredibly important. Of course, all of these will come with case studies because we want to make sure that the lessons that we learn are shared with you, hopefully vice versa, so that we can continually iterate to make sure that not just anyone with a smartphone can access inclusive finance, but anyone with a phone, period, including feature phones. So this is something that's super, super important. Really looking forward to working with Will and others on this. And certainly a lot of work to be done, but I think we're headed in the right direction. And last but not least, so as a part of Emerging Impact's mission to enable open banking for emerging markets, and this new term DMI is hopefully a catch on again, is what we're creating with Emoja. So Emoja is a protocol and product suite that really brings DeFi to marginalized communities. Obviously, there are technical literacy obstacles, there are device accessibility obstacles, and there's internet and data availability obstacles as well. So you have to build around that. You have to create, wallets that are feature phone compatible. You have to create management suites that NGOs can leverage to convert normal money into CUSD so that they can disperse it to thousands of people at a time, or allow FSPs to create flexible lending pools to onboard people who have never been able to receive a loan. And so this is what I would say is the initial infrastructure of how we see open banking in these markets. But of course, we want other people to build on top of it. Because there are changes and cultural nuances to how finance is accessed. And lastly, we'll have an Emoja commerce wallet for vendors to enable informal, economy, micro enterprises to do business digitally, and also participate in many of the humanitarian aid programs that require them. And that is me.
Fantastic, Robbie. This is really inspiring work. And as someone who came from the aid sector, I think we both recognize there's a lot of opportunities for improvements and for disruption here. So appreciate what you and your team are doing. Last but not least, I'm excited to introduce Lillian Alexander, who represents Mercy Corps Ventures. Mercy Corps Ventures and the Celo Foundation have recently wrapped up an exciting pilot that she'll talk a little bit more about. Lillian, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Will. Hi, all. It's great to be here. My name is Lillian. I work with Mercy Corps Ventures, which is the impact investing division of Mercy Corps. For those not familiar, Mercy Corps is a leading global development agency that works in over 40 countries to build more productive, just, and secure communities. Next slide, please. FinX is a recently launched initiative within Mercy Corps Ventures designed to invest in, pilot, and build evidence for how emerging fintech, crypto, and blockchain solutions can help to redefine and rebuild a more inclusive global financial system with the most vulnerable populations at the center of its design rather than as an afterthought. And as part of the Finex initiative, as Will mentioned, we recently partnered with the Celo Foundation to pilot a specific use case for the Celo dollar and Valora wallet in the context of digital microwork for vulnerable youth in Kenya. Next slide, please. So there are several factors that made Kenya an ideal geography for this pilot. Next slide, please. The first being that there is an overwhelmingly young demographic with over 75% of the population, which is now well over 50 million, under the age 35. Young people in Kenya face particularly high unemployment, which was further exacerbated by the restrictions and lockdowns related to COVID-19. Furthermore, we recognize that there were several barriers to the viability of online microwork, including very slow and expensive means of issuing cross-border payments. In some cases, traditional money services can cost up to 30% of gross wages in transaction fees. So we saw a very clear market need to address here. Next slide, please. In designing this pilot, we focused on 3 core hypotheses. The first addressing whether the Celo dollar could provide a means of cheaper and faster cross-border payments. The second looked at whether online microwork could be a viable employment opportunity for this specific demographic. And lastly, we wanted to explore whether the Valora wallet and its built-in reward system might actually encourage youth to use the wallet not only as a means for cashing out their microwork earnings, but also as a potential savings mechanism. Next slide, please. Great, so this is a snapshot of our pilot participants. We worked with 200 vulnerable youth from low-income settlements in and around Nairobi. Our sample was 57% female, 23 years on average. The pilot was available to people between 18 and 29 years. So these are young people, some of whom are still living at home with relatives, others who are living independently. Some are supporting families of their own. So we see the average household size was over 4 people, and 53% of the sample reported that they themselves also supported dependents, whether that's children, a spouse, or elder parents. And there was a 70% unemployment rate across our sample at baseline. Next slide, please. In terms of pilot design, we had several different partners involved. Mercy Corps Kenya and our local training partner, Nairobits, first recruited, trained, and onboarded the participants. Like I mentioned, we had 200 youth, and we separated them into 4 cohorts of 50 youth each, who were onboarded one at a time with a few weeks in between each cohort to allow for learning and iteration and adaptation. So once onboarded, youth would use the Toka app on their Android smartphones to access microwork tasks from Appin's global platform. And as they conducted work and earned money, they could transfer their earnings from Toka to the Valora wallet, where they could choose to save their earnings in Celo dollars or cash out any amount at any frequency to M-Pesa using Katani Pay's blockchain off-ramp service. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there were 4 cohorts, and we experimented with different training methods. And a key learning for us here was just how important it is to localize the training and onboarding experience, both in terms of the structure of the delivery, as well as the content of the training material. So we first started with in-person classroom-based training for the first 2 cohorts. Next slide, please. And then for the last 2 cohorts, we tested out different models of virtual training. So for the 3rd cohort, the trainers actually hosted a live Zoom session, shared the training materials over WhatsApp, and they used the Zoom breakout rooms to facilitate smaller question and answer groups. And the 4th cohort was a very light touch, completely self-paced training using a series of pre-recorded instructional videos on YouTube that participants watched on their own time. Next slide, please. So now that pilot implementation has wrapped up, we're focused on data analysis and impact measurement. To do this, we're employing a mix of quantitative and qualitative impact measurement tools, including baseline and endline surveys, user interviews like this one here with Mercy, and transaction level data to measure outcomes and understand the impact on end users. Next slide, please. So while our full set of results are not yet available, we did just want to share some key learnings. Next slide, please. First, there's a high demand for online microwork. We're really pleased to see the excitement from youth to join this pilot. We had over 1,000 applications in just 48 hours. We also saw a lot of excitement from our own Mercy Corps programs and country teams. So the demand is definitely there. However, for this to be a viable solution, we need to test the actual availability of open platform work at a greater scale and understand the longer term impact of the earnings from microwork. Can the supply sufficiently meet demand, not just in terms of the quantity of work, but also the quality and how well it matches the skill set of vulnerable populations? And lastly, there are regulatory and local integration factors to consider. So stablecoin networks, cannot be fully integrated with the local banking systems and mobile money operators until regulators are more comfortable with these technologies. And without this systemic integrations, users can face hurdles, cashing in, cashing out, additional fees for off-ramping, etc. Next slide, please. So please stay tuned. Check out our blog at finex.vc. We'll be publishing the full results and learnings, both from this pilot as well as other pilots that are currently ongoing on that blog. Thanks very much. I'll pass it back over to Will.
Thanks so much, Lillian. What great projects we had today. I'm really excited to see how members of the Celo community are really taking this idea of creating prosperity for all and moving forward in their respective ways. So we're a little short on time, but I think we have time for one short question. I would love to ask everyone here, you have a lot of experience working with low-income communities, traditionally marginalized communities. What advice would you have for members of the Celo community, builders who are looking to create solutions that are really designed for everybody?
That's a great question. Mel, I can jump in and get us kicked off. My main recommendation would be spend time in these markets, go to the field, understand, what these communities look like, how they operate. If you can take short visits, great. If you can be there for a few years, even longer, open offices in emerging markets, partner with local organizations, hire local talent, really focus your solutions on these vulnerable populations, make it work for them, and understand their unique needs and challenges.
I would follow that up, and this may be more, more on the engineering side in terms of like, how do you get around a lot of these obstacles, right? How do you create an application that works without internet, minimal, verbiage if possible. And I would say just do a lot of research as to, what does the financial ecosystem look like? What are the, what APIs work in those areas? You'll find it won't be as much as you would hope, but you will find key partners, and leveraging their resources in addition to where you're thinking about building, could create an entire market, right? A lot of these places are underserved, not only because of, different, geopolitical, economic, issues or cadences, but also because I think a lot of the Western tech world ignores creating solutions, and so I think that's really, really important. But to the earlier point, it's also important that you understand the culture, right? That you're engaged with the community and you're not building from afar. That's also super important.
I definitely echo the sentiments of the panel here. I think solution designers need to understand the profile of the user. People use an application because they see the relevance to it and how it addresses their most challenging concerns. And it really starts on building the trust on the platform or getting their trust. So in Grameen, in the past programs, we've already created like probably two types of profiles. The one is the skeptic, and those are the people who have little exposure to digital platforms, probably experience becoming a victim of scams or frauds, and it would take more time for them to be convinced to try out a service. But once you gain their trust, they are able to influence their circles, their groups, and their social networks. And these folks really value their money. So to make sure that your solutions are they gain the trust and continue to use them, having a proof of transactions, it's a good start. And more importantly, have their leaders and authority figures explain and introduce the system. It really helps, especially on digital literacy and telling them to try this out. And of course, there are the digital natives that are already proactive users and really are learning about the different types of trends and services. So what they value really are the ease in making these transactions. So in making sure that you gain their trust and continue to have them use your service, then look at the fees and compare the features and make sure that you offer a wider range of product and services that are at a competitive and market price, so that they also look into the types of customer service support that is available in the platforms. And once they gain your trust, it flies like it spreads the word, and it also gets shared to their networks and to their types of friends and neighbors. So I think for us in Grameen, financial inclusion, it's not just about opening an account, but it's making sure that you have a wide range of available services. And of course, gaining the trust and making sure that the trust is gets continued throughout the service.
Thank you. And I just want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists for their time today and your presentations, and for your great work around the world, bringing more financial inclusion to all. So thank you. And it's back to you, Angelo.